not the snappiest of titles, but really, I have to say this is a holy paper, not in the spiritual way. It is a paper full of holes. But that's what conferences like this really are for. And just by proposing this paper, I've already learnt that there are other people interested in Mrs. Frazer, and I've been given some really super tips on ways to go. That's what it's all about. And I've also been given leads by other scholars who've supported this, like Peter Martland, who've scoured their collections for useful fragments, which I think are just beginning to come together to form a rough portrait of one of the first women and one of the most enterprising educationalists to embrace the phonograph. And her name was mentioned 26 times yesterday. Admittedly, half of them were Duncan affectionately referring to Inya as Mrs. Frazer. But nevertheless, she has gained a certain currency. But who was the real Mrs. Frazer? Here she is, on the left. Double portrait with her husband. You know, Mrs. Frazer had lots of names. She was born Elisabeth Johanna Edelsdorfer in Alsace in about 1854, 1855. In 1877, she married Charles Grove, a British master mariner, and she became Lily Grove, but not for long. Her husband died in 1889, and she found herself in Britain with 2 children and not much money. The entrepreneurial spirit ran deep and strong in Lily, and she turned to writing, as we've all done from time to make a crust. And she produced the first encyclopedic survey of dance in English in about 1895, although we understand actually she knew almost nothing about dancing at all, but that didn't stop her. And again, that's something that perhaps we may feel a connection with. For help on the section on dance among the primitives, she approached James George Frazer, a Cambridge academic, and it was obviously a very fruitful research trip because they married a year or so later, and when James was knighted in 1914, Mrs. J.G. Frazer became Lady Frazer, and she was inordinately proud of this. Now, we've already heard from Will a little of the background to James Frazer, but allow me just to refresh memories a bit. James Frazer, on the right there, was the archetypal armchair anthropologist. I love that phrase. And he based himself for much of his life in Trinity College, Cambridge, and he really sat there and didn't explore himself, but he was sort of the centre. He gathered anthropological data through a network of correspondence and was clearly the mentor in many ways for a number of key anthropological research trips. And today he's best known for his book, The Golden Bough of the 1890s, which was an extensive and fascinating study of ancient cults, magic, rites and myths. And when I read theology in the 1980s, it was still required reading. That's the 1980s. Now, by all accounts, James Frazer himself was an unworldly and unassuming man. But Lily Frazer was neither unworldly nor unassuming, and she seems to have made it her mission in life to support vigorously, to promote her husband's work. But I don't want to talk about that, amusing though it is to find out about her extraordinary character. But Lily had her own literary career. It was long and surprisingly varied, and initially as I said, she published to make a living and then quickly established a reputation for accessible guides to the French language. And she also, naturally enough, supervised the translation of her husband's work, not only into French, but she managed other translators. And she exploited the market for popular spin-offs, like on the right there, the collection of stories she culled from The Golden Bough and retold for children. Children are a recurrent theme. She was interested in the education of the young. She also produced a little fiction, an opera libretto, and, thank goodness, a dash of humour. First Aid to the Servantless from 1913 was witty, and in fact a sort of a prescient description of middle-class life without servants. It's all about the latest labour-saving devices, some of which existed, some of which almost certainly didn't. One of my favourites is, decades before its time, a fantastical device called the Dreadnought, which was a dishwasher. And what it shows is that she clearly loved modern gadgets, and she wasn't frightened by them. And hence, she's quite witty about them. And it was a small step from the Dreadnought to the phonograph. Now, James Frazer, as we said, was the inspiration for many 19th and early 20th century anthropological expeditions. And the first of these was in 1898, the Cambridge expedition to the Torres Straits in West Africa, to which both James and Lily Frazer offered practical backing and various kinds of specialist support. Some of these pictures we're going to see will be familiar from the last few days. I love this one. We don't yet know when Lily first encountered the phonograph or exactly how she gained her experience using them. But for the 1898 expedition, second-hand accounts tell us that she facilitated the training of field anthropologists and the delicate art of recording speech and song, as well as equipping these expeditions with blank cylinders and the equipment they needed, presumably including the Edison home phonographs, which appear in so many of the photographs from this 1898 expedition. And here's one. We saw this photograph yesterday, and if you look carefully at the picture on the right, you can, of course, see the lid of the Edison home phonograph, available from 1898, in fact. I have an identical one myself. And you can see there is, if you look very carefully, there is no cylinder on the mandrel. So this is very much a posed photograph, but I suspect it's kind of not dissimilar to the kind of informal conditions that probably pertained when recordings were made. People grouped round, perhaps the phonograph on the ground and not on a proper flat frame. Well, the Frasers helped field workers, it seems, on their return to England, forming quasi-archives, which Will referred to, and housing cylinders. And it's not sometimes clear, I think, whether they were housing them, as it were, temporarily for scholars, or whether they were housing them because they intended to hang on to them, and to what extent duplicates were made for themselves or for their colleagues, again, isn't certain yet. The Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford holds a substantial collection of duplicate cylinders from Northcote Thomas's Nigerian expedition of 1909-10, and Will mentioned yesterday that he transferred hundreds, if not thousands of these, and he's much too modest to play examples of his own work, but I'm not prohibited. So I thought we should hear just a short clip of what we're talking about here. And this is a wonderful sort of pre-echo of Steve Reich's drumming. Do we hear that with the speakers? Oh, we did. Oh, brilliant. Fantastic. Oh, fantastic. I need to look further into Lily Frazer's duplication work, but actually talking yesterday to people, it seems that this is a very big area. But I think she was probably using quite simple equipment, pantographing equipment, and with this, she seems to have achieved with her team really quite good results, and as shown by that excellent transfer. Thank you, Will. I'm currently working my way through Frazer's papers at Trinity College, Cambridge, and some of the most useful material I found actually is in the papers of James Frazer, probably not surprisingly. And here are a couple of letters which sort of shed a little bit of light on the kind of advice Lily Frazer was still giving to expedition leaders as late as 1918. Now, again, we heard a bit about this from Will yesterday, but this just offers a little bit more context to some of the quotes. In the first letter from June 1914, James Frazer writes to John Roscoe, "She warns you strongly, this is strictly private, against taking lessons from Charles Myers, who, in her opinion, understands neither the scientific nor the musical aspect of the phonograph and is otherwise not well fitted to give instructions." Myers was the recordist we saw in the first of the 1898 Torres Straits photos. Marvellous. Through her husband, Lily recommended the help of William Manning, a technician at the Cambridge Solar Physics Observatory, who'd worked for her and, she said, understood the phonograph well, especially its use in tropical climates. Now, in both these letters, she stresses how important it is to spend time getting to know the phonograph and how it works, and to practice with it regularly. And we've obviously seen with the demonstrations yesterday the kinds of issues that have come up if you are not used to using the phonograph on a regular basis, and even if you are, the sorts of problems that are presented. In 1914, on the left there, she offers to purchase a phonograph for John Roscoe as her contribution to his proposed expedition, which didn't in fact happen. And in 1918, she again cautions against Myers, whom she says has for years, as Will has said, explores cheap and unreliable German instruments. I love that. It bears repetition. The results of which, and again, are patent to any listener, which suggests that she had access to many comparative cylinders to come to these kinds of conclusions. In the November 1918 letter to the right here, William Manning is described by James Frazer as the scientific workman who worked with my wife for years at the phonograph in Cambridge. And I suspect that Manning may have been the phonographic brains behind the recording and production of Mrs. Frazer's own language cylinders made over a decade earlier, which are the main focus this morning. Language course cylinders emerged, I think, probably during the 1890s, probably hitting a peak of interest in England around about 1906, when Sterling Records provided cylinders for Rees's well-established pictorial language series, which you see illustrated there. Such courses as this tended to concentrate on vocabulary, grammar, phonetics, as well as rehearsing useful conversational gambits. I mean, on the whole, what I've heard suggests that the delivery was usually fairly deadpan, repetitious, based around the same restricted intonation patterns. Let's hear a little extract of that.
German lesson number 2. Können...
No.
Sorry, that's my lesson. Try again.
Yeah, thank you. No. Do you want me to...
German lesson number 2. Können Sie Deutsch verstehen? Ja, ich kann ein wenig Deutsch verstehen. Können Sie gut Deutsch verstehen? Nein, ich kann nicht sehr gut Deutsch verstehen. Können Sie Englisch verstehen? Ja, ich bin ein Engländer und kann sehr gut Englisch verstehen. Ich bin, du bist, er ist. Wir sind, Sie sind, Sie sind.
Well, a trifle prosaic, and very much adult territory. And Mrs. Frazer, on the other hand, wanted to inspire, and particularly to inspire the young by taking phonographs into schools, and that sort of thing really was not going to cut the mustard.
German lesson number
No, let's just...
2.
There we go. It's not going to... No, let's see. No. It just wants to play that again. Let me go to... There we go. Thank you very much. Lovely. Now, here we have an article that Mrs. Frazer wrote for the November 1905 Journal of Education. This is actually the reprint in the Talking Machine News. And she said she'd been thinking of using phonographs for school language teaching since about 1893. And in 1902, she actually presented a phonograph to the Perse School in Cambridge, which she claimed was a first in England for a school to have a phonograph. Now, in 1905, in this article, aimed at teachers, she makes a really comprehensive case for the multifarious uses of the phonograph in the classroom. Too much to unpack now, but a couple of points stand out. Unexpectedly, she thought that the greatest value of the phonograph in the classroom would be to perfect the English of English teachers. She had an extremely low opinion of English teachers. And she reckoned that the phonograph's ability to repeat things would also make it easier for pupils to get the hang of those really difficult sounds that crop up in every language. This all seems to make good sense. She even seriously proposed that the phonograph could be used as an instrument of punishment for unruly boys. And the idea was that they would learn lines from Horace and Virgil from one phonograph and they would dictate them back into another. All in the safety of a soundproof room. Good boys could listen to music and recitations. Very different times. Well, Mrs. Frazer also took part in public lectures promoting the phonograph in higher education. In August 1906, she illustrated a lecture given by Dr. Karl Breuil in Cambridge with extracts from her own language cylinders. And in his book, which I've given you the title page there on the right, on teaching modern foreign languages, published later in that year, Breuil mentions how useful he thought the recordings he'd made for her were, very much from a male perspective. Now here we get to some of the meat. In the middle is the only known catalogue listing Mrs. Frazer's Cambridge phonographic records. Cast your eyes up and down quickly. It looks fairly well developed, probably complete, and contains the German cylinders that Karl Breuil mentions in his 1906 book. I found dating this catalogue and the cylinders contained in it really very tricky. There are really no clues in any of the published literature which was brought out by Heffer's bookshop in Cambridge, who seemed to have been her collaborators. There was nothing in the trade press either that I found so far, and of course there's nothing on the cylinders themselves. But I think with a clear cut-off date of 1906 given by those German cylinders, and Frazer's gift of a phonograph to the Perse School in 1902, which is only going to be really useful if you've actually got some pre-recorded cylinders to play on it, we get a likely window of around about 1900 to 1906 for the genesis of these language cylinders. And it's a date range supported by the availability of that Pathé phonograph, which we see on the left there, which Mrs. Frazer recommends. Now again, just looking at that central catalogue, looking down the list of categories in the French section at the top, we can see various obvious tiers of difficulty. Possibly for school use, there's a set of nursery songs and readings from Frazer's own beginner's guide, Scenes of Child Life. Slightly more challenging are the shortish fables by La Fontaine. Then there's plenty for advanced listeners, linguists, scenes from Molière's plays, and then reading from French classical prose. This is all a far cry from the conversational and grammar-based courses offered by the likes of Rees that we heard a moment ago. Looking down at the German classical and English sections too, we can see just actually by looking at the authors mentioned that the route to learning offered by Mrs. Frazer's cylinders was essentially literary. And aspiring linguists then were able to immerse themselves in the sounds and the feel of a language from its classical literature. Realistically, anyone who bought this series must have got the nuts and bolts from Rees or somewhere else. These cylinders, I think, were very much a finishing school. And they seem to have been equally suited to the home, to the school, and to university teaching. Frazer, of course, was very well placed. She had a large talent pool on which to draw for her speakers, including academic friends of her husband's in Cambridge and members of staff at the very progressive Perse School in the city. Second in there is the headmaster, W.H.D. Rouse, and he was joined by the academics Sir John Sandys and Professor Arthur Verrill for the Latin and Greek cylinders. And Karl Breuil himself was solely in charge of the German series. He was, in fact, the first professor of German at Cambridge. And the English series was headed up by the great Shakespearean actor Sir Frank Benson on the right there, who we know recorded material from Henry V particularly. So far, though, I've not been able to find a picture of the most prolific linguist, Léon Chouville, responsible for over 80 of the French cylinders, and he taught at the Perse School, where we believe Mrs. Frazer actually paid his salary. Not many of Frazer's Cambridge phonographic cylinders have survived. They were probably produced, I think, in quite small numbers for an elite audience. And so far, I've only found 3 small collections. On the left, 9 cylinders owned by a friend of mine, colleague in the City of London Phonographic and Gramophone Society. On the right, 12 cylinders held by the University of Toronto. And both sets are actually in the original boxes supplied to the Cambridge Phonographic Record Project by Heffer's Bookshop in Cambridge. And these are perhaps the most interesting. This is the third case of 10 cylinders, and I'm happy to say they are from my own collection. It's so nice to say that. It's so lovely to have primary source material that you don't have to go to a library to examine. It's just there waiting for you to take it out in the morning and stroke it and put it back if you're not feeling in the mood to elicit anything interesting from it. Anyway, I have tried to do a little of that. This lot in Actura they're in mixed condition, honestly. Some are in almost unplayed condition. Some have clearly been played well, and some are fatally cracked. I think I'm going to... in fact, I think... Am I running out of time slightly? Yes. I'm usually so good with time. So what I'm going to do is just say that if we look on the right here, this shows the red sections show the cylinder numbers of the surviving cylinders from each of those categories. Only the French cylinders really survive. There's one English cylinder that survives. And we want to listen to some of these. 28 cylinders survive in total from probably a production run of about 160. Let me just give you a quick look at what they look like. Mostly brown wax with Mrs. Frazer's name engraved on the end. And we've got some later ones with a moulded name. And she uses Edison Bell blanks. And the label there is familiar from some of the labels we saw in the duplicated anthropological cylinders yesterday. I think I'm going to... How much time have I got? 5 minutes? 4 minutes? 3 minutes? Okay. This would never work on radio, let me tell you. So what I'm going to do is, I think, in fact, I really want to play you just a little example of really one of the most, for me, one of the most amusing, to get a sense of what she's all about. This is Molière, Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme, and she recorded very large chunks of Molière, and let's just listen to a little bit of this, and you'll get a sense of what they were doing. Now, yeah, I'm not going to say anything about this. Let's gauge your reaction. I'm not sure what Nicole would have taught contemporary listeners apart from how to do a stage laugh and how to do it must be a man, mustn't it? So these cylinders really do, they're important because they are perhaps some of the first to record large sections of literature and present it in quite animated ways, sometimes amusing, but sometimes actually the dramatic presentations are really impressive. Mrs. Frazer organised dramatic productions at the Perse School in Cambridge with various members of staff, herself and the boys taking part. And I think some of the cylinders probably represent highlights from these. Well, I think that's probably a good note on which to leave things, and I think there's much research still to do. I said this was a holy talk, and I think there's a lot of progress to be made on the pinning down a little bit more firmly Mrs. Frazer's involvement with early expeditionary recordings, and I know I'm going to get lots of help on that. Thank you very much indeed for listening.